question.
Yep.
So I just want you to sort of encapsulate your theory here. So with a combination of natural, uh, features
Yes,
and man-made,
exactly.
what was the objective here?
What was the objective? If I were
I bet.
moose hunting and this structure was intact as I visualize it to have been, right? It would have been an excellent place to drive a moose so he would be impeded from going any further and he would be in my gun sights. Now, there were no moose in Newfoundland back, of course, when the European settlers first came here, but there were caribou. Caribou is native to the island. So, was it a barrier to impede the movement of animals? We don't know. But at the end of the walk today, you won't know either. You won't have any answers any more than I have. But hopefully you'll have some very interesting questions.
But your theory does, if your theory suggests that this was an attempt to direct animals, towards the water, obviously. So this piece of land here would not have been. So the animals, without the wall, the animals may have headed off into the woods.
Exactly.
Is that it? And coming across here and through the woods. So you want to, with the wall, just direct them towards the harbor.
Well, either pin them up against the wall,
Right.
which would be okay, or divert them into the water. And once in the water, the caribou then, of course, is at the mercy of any kind of hunter who wants to spear it, who probably wants to entangle it and drown it, and perhaps shoot them with arrows. But I suspect that shooting animals with arrows in the water was
If
not.
there were a rock wall, how does a caribou respond to rock? Pile of
Well,
rock?
a pile of rock as high as you see it here and as high as it would have been, they wouldn't have been able to get over it. Okay? Even a low rock wall like we see at Little Islands and like we see up below the big hill leading up to the Great Wall, even a low rock wall wouldn't be traversed by caribou unless they were excited. If they were browsing along, you see, they'd move along and avoid this rock wall. Caribou hooves they're bigger than mooses, as a matter of fact. They tend to splay open because the terrain, of course, they're used to feeding on is barren and marsh and so forth. And they would tend to avoid any kind of a rock in a boreal landscape like we have here is pretty difficult. But let's go back, say, maybe several thousand years. This landscape might have been more tundra-like, more barren land, you see. Something like the tip of the Bay de Verde Peninsula, around Bay de Verde, Greats Cove. No problem getting rocks from the ground there. But to get rocks from the ground entangled in the roots of trees, you can imagine the kind of work that would entail.
So there's a possibility that it could have been barren and you wouldn't have had a lot of trees and the caribou could have been, around, no trouble to see them,
I think what you have to picture, I just want to add a little to it here. I think what you have to picture back thousands of years, as Grant just mentioned, this piece of land, no trees. You have to try to see it with no trees. These trees were not here back when those rocks were there. They were not here.
Probably not here. Probably a landscape very similar to what you have on the tip of the Bay de Verde Peninsula. More evidence of Europeans building up the path to accommodate a horse and cart or perhaps a wheelbarrow. So that's European.
You figured as European.
But it's still related to something that's probably not European that we'll see later on. are so many rock piles and so much tonnage of rocks that to attribute it to an Aboriginal group, it's almost impossible, because these groups tended to live in small family units, or maybe a couple of families or an extended family unit. It took a lot of people over a long time to do this. Now, was this perhaps a place where a number of these smaller groups were attracted to it sometime in the year? We don't know. There's a possibility, but we don't know.
There could have been an abundance of caribou or abundance of some other food source, even fish, you know, for that matter. There could have been an abundance in this area and people congregated here
Exactly.
just in the summer probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Or was it a place where they all congregated, say, at the end of their seasonal exploitation of the resources, after they had stored enough food? Like Capeland, you see, Capeland was a major resource. They could have smoked salmon, and we also have caribou, and all the other fur-bearing animals like the foxes, lynx, and so forth. You know, let's not forget the cod, because cod is present on this shore, and it can be caught with a hand line from April till December. You can actually catch cod.
yeah.
by
I'm not from around here, so I don't know anything about smoking salmon, but we'll get you high. Never mind.
I'm only just hearing you. Okay.
He said if you
Right.
smoke salmon, do you
Well,
get
smoked
high?
capelin will get you high.
We'll try it later.
Try it and see.
If you smoke capelin, you will get high, believe me. But I mean, the capelin was just an inexhaustible resource. And you can imagine the numbers back, say, thousands of years ago being far in excess of what we see today.
Yeah, but getting back to the burial mound thing, I mean, there's only so many of these things around, and there had to be a lot of deaths, so you wouldn't be building a burial mound for each death.
Probably a family.
Or would it be a whole family? Would they, you know, like if you're not going to wait until, you know, several
I'm
people
wondering
die.
if what happened with it was that when somebody died in the family, yes, they did make a mound, probably a very low one, and then when somebody else died in the family, they were buried in the same plot, and more rocks buried
Yeah.
until it became, you
Yeah.
know,
So that, yeah, would that be,
a plot.
Or-
had that
No.
been done before?
Has that been done?
Or discovered?
I don't know whether it's been done before or not. And I'm not an expert in these things. I'm only an observer. That's all I am in anything, an observer. And I guess we are all observers, aren't we? We are expert, in a sense, in what our forefathers did to make a living in the fishery. Because Randy's and Rhoda's father was a fisherman, and generations before they were fishermen. And we have an awareness of the kind of activities that they would pursue, right, in trying to eke a living out in the fishery. That's why we can't put these kind of mounds in that context.
No.
No.
Not in recent history.
No.
It's not
No.
related.
It's not related.
Not
It's too
related.
far away from the
Too far.
shoreline, from the town.
That's right.
It's too far away. You just try.
My guess would be if they lived here on a seasonal basis, this would be your seasonal burial mound. Any
Yeah,
members of the
Right,
tribe
any
that died,
any member.
In
That's
that
right.
season.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
you know, so maybe this was a good year, the small mound. Right?
Let her rip.
Okay, now, the rocks we saw on the pathway leading up to here we determined them to be Europeans firming up a footpath to make it into a cart path or a wheelbarrow path to access a garden just a little ways beyond. Now, what relationship does it have to these structures? Well, you can see the larger perimeter stones have been pulled aside, you see,
Right.
so that access could be gained to smaller tabular stones that were used to build up the European path.
Right. So this was bigger.
Not much.
Not a lot.
You can actually see the outline there, but you can also see the rocks that have been taken out,
Right.
right?
Right.
Now, the study did say that the pathway was built up to allow access by carts and perhaps horses and wheelbarrows to the mound as they were building the mound. So the study sort of put the cart before the mound. I think clearly the mound comes before the cart,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Because
Yes.
yeah, they still never proved that this was European.
No.
This particular.
Okay, so sorry, they were suggesting that the carts carried these rocks to here, from where?
And why?
Yeah, why? Good question. Why would they pile them up?
Yeah. Why would they?
I can only infer that the mound predated the cart and the mound was cannibalized at a later period, how much later we don't know, by Europeans to firm up the path leading to the garden.
Now, wouldn't that be more logical?
That is temporal logic.
Yeah. So
And circumstantial logic is what we have to apply in all these instances.
yeah, yeah. And again, the purpose for this, say, ancient time, would be a burial mound, possibly.
We don't know.
We don't know.
We
but-
don't know.
So, if
But-
we're, you know,
When you look at something like this, you search for models. In Lansamore, in Labrador, there's a burial mound, and it's been excavated and determined to be the burial of a maritime archaic youth. We had a visitor here on the last trip who had seen that mound, and when I referred to it, the similarity, she says, it's not similar, it's exactly the same.
one youth,
Yes,
the
a
excavator.
single youth.
How big of a mound would that have been as compared to this one?
Probably about the size of this one,
Yeah, and that one's well documented, isn't it?
isn't it?
Yes.
That one is.
It is. I was just wondering the size of it.
I think about the size. Now, the lady who was here on the last tour, who had visited, said, when I suggested it was similar, she said, it's exactly the same. Emphatically, she said, exactly the same.
Yeah. So, but would you try to think about what else would be logical for the reason of this? Like, there's nothing else comes to your mind.
So when you're ready, Mike.
Go ahead, sir.
Now, this is the 19th century European potato garden. And of course, the pathway leading up to here, you notice where the rocks were placed in the path to firm up the path. Probably for a cart with a horse, perhaps for a wheelbarrow, right?
Yep.
So, totally 19th century European,
Yes.
no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt.
And these rocks here, and the rocks just past it, no doubt they were cleared from the garden.
From the garden.
This is the Great Wall of Hant's Harbour, or the Great Walls, as there are two of them that run separately and then parallel. leading up to the big hill. Now, was this done by Europeans and for what purpose? Was it done by Europeans with horses and carts to make a roadway somewhere? You have to look around for a cart track, which would be obvious even after a couple of hundred years. The pathway used by the cart would have been obvious. I don't see any pathway here for a cart. And the study they did last fall was inconclusive on the Great Wall.
Randy.
They had no commentary on who fabricated the Great Wall.
Your theory, Grant.
I don't have a theory, I have some thoughts. My theory, my thoughts. Again, if you're looking, let's take the duck analogy. If you want to see models, look in northern Canada, northern Labrador, and Greenland, and you find caribou drive lanes leading into enclosures or barriers or leading into a body of water like a lake or a river, right? So you had to ask the question, is this something like that?
If it were, what do you think? Where were the caribou coming from? Where were they trying to direct them to?
If it were, there is a path that follows along this lower wall here, through the woods, approximately to the southeast, intersects the path to New Chelsea that we already talked about, goes over the ridge. Interestingly, it's a moose trail today. Was it a caribou trail some years ago? That would explain this configuration here. Right? This configuration, well, the caribou could have perhaps been coming from this direction. Having been driven in that direction, their return they would have met this barrier on the return.
Okay, so where was somebody trying to direct them to? Just so I can get a picture.
Okay. Dr. Jack Brink did a study of caribou hunting techniques on Victoria Island in the Northwest Territories. That's a barren island. It might have been like that in this area, right? And he found that the deer lanes would start off as low walls, you see, and progressively get higher, leading into a sort of funnel. And the Inuit hunters would position themselves in hollows, perhaps toward the end of the funnel. And he was puzzled, Dr. Brink was puzzled why at the end of the funnel, at the end of the exit, you see, there would sometimes be an upright stone and an ukshuk. He was puzzled as to why this was set up there. Now, I've hunted caribou in Labrador. The George River herd, when they numbered almost 1 million animals, right? And Dr. Brink, in his interviews with native peoples, referred to the action of caribou when they're met with an obstacle like an inukshuk that stands upright. And on top of this inukshuk, they would probably place a sod upside down, you see? So it would present itself as a foreign object to the caribou. The caribou's tendency then would be to mass together in a bunch, making them easy prey, you see? The hunters could pick off the outermost members of the band, and still the tendency would be to bunch together. Now, I've seen that myself. In Labrador, in hunting caribou, in one instance I shot a caribou, and a half a dozen more came along and sniffed at the animal I just shot. And we had a license, I think, for 6 at that time, and we got our 6 caribou. And that's why I'm saying the caribou would avoid a stone wall, even though it were a low stone wall. They would still avoid it. If they were panicked and excited, of course, they would probably jump over the low wall, right? But by the time they reached this area, when they became panicked, the walls are too high to jump over.
So which direction would you think they'd be coming from here? From,
Mostly from this way here, from the barrens, from the interior, okay, from the southeast. But it's not impossible or unlikely that the strays might have come from this area, because there's another access coming out to Soper's Hill, you see, from the interior, from the country, which crosses a marsh. So they could have made their way out that way, you see.
some coming this way.
That's right.
So this would serve like a pound, because there's a lot of natural barriers behind here, correct?
This would have served as a pound, but again, you can't make the pound too obvious. If the animal senses entrapment, it's not going to go there, right? So you have to sort of leave an opening, which is what we see here.
Will we move on to Altar Rock?
Yep, because I'm not allowed to disturb any soil or rocks or anything, right? I just took a couple of tree branches and made an inukshuk, like they would in Labrador.
I see what you have done there.
See what I got done? Do you like
I
it?
just saw what
Now,
you've done. Wasn't
that
done
would present
before.
itself as a foreign object.
Yes.
The rock itself mightn't be too intrusive, but the rock, you see, with a sod or tree branches on top, would be. It's a foreign object.
Was that rock moved upright, I wonder? Did they actually move that upright?
When I came here first, I looked at it and say, how unusual. It's a rock fall for sure. I mean, the rock tumbled from up on the cliff.
Yeah.
How unusual that it reached a situation like that. But I said it must have been a natural slide, because nobody could slide it to where it is and then stick it upright. And after a while I became a little more convinced that, well, it could have slid there by a natural process, but it was most likely uprighted by somebody, right? The last tour, we had Bill Tucker, who's a retired engineer, who went around the back of the stone, and lo and behold, he found rocks that appear to
Yes.
have been used
They were pushed in.
Oh, they were
in
pushed in there.
uprighting the stone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bill Tucker, a retired engineer, it takes an engineer, see, right? He found the rocks there that appear to have been used to upright the stone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Want to get this one now, Mike?
He said his lectern.
I don't know if this pose is going to be too ridiculous. But Randy, you want to take the axe and pretend you're going to decapitate me?
Of course.
Yeah, do that.
I've been waiting.
Now, we have a storm coming, a hurricane. And, of course, to keep in the good graces with the netherworld, we're going to do a sacrifice to Nigafuk, who was the Eskimo god of storms. Okay, Randy, when you're ready, do the honors. Put the link on Facebook. No, I don't know where the link is now, but I got it in PDF anyway.
But I'm wondering if
Huh?
makes some absolute
There's nothing as goofy in my hair.
No, I'm thinking of a seance type of experience where somebody can there are people, psychic type people, and it could be a native person with specific rituals, to be able to
Look,
relive the history. I mean, to
Yes.
glimpse into the history and
Yes.
feel the history of the place.
I'm going to take you into another dimension now. Something that was mentioned to me, and I more or less scoffed at it first, was the religious aspect of this place here. You got the big hill there. Just imagine a terrain, barren land terrain. It would have been a bare outcrop, right? There were recent Indians here in Hants Harbour, 100% certainty, because of what Bill Gilbert discovered. No doubt there were Paleo-Eskimos. No doubt there were maritime archaic. This hill here would have been a prominence that they would have used to spot caribou in the interior, seals and whales offshore, and did it acquire over time a mystical sort of religious experience? Did it? We don't know.
Right.
People on tours have mentioned that aspect, and I dispelled it, but like Melvin Green said on the last tour, he said, my opinion is that they really didn't have time for religion. They might have had taboos, or they might have had beliefs, or this or that, but their whole existence was surviving. But like Melvin very adroitly said, actually their religion was their surviving. They looked to their religion for their survival, as well as to the resources.
Yeah, very much so.
Very much.
Because that's well documented.
This is the highest prominence in the area.
So
Yeah.
if this area happened to, contribute greatly to their survival by offering abundance of cod and capelin and possibly, a migration route for caribou, that's enough to add spiritual significance. I mean, especially where it brings them here for a significant portion of the year.
Yeah.
And, it's all about giving thanks to Mother Earth. So
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
assume there would be some ceremonial.
I've often pondered about this sort of a clearing in a place where there are really no clearings but piles of rocks. Often wondered. If this were a Greek tragedy, the play would have been acted out near the altar, right? This would have been a place where the chorus made their commentaries on the action. It's almost into Sophoclean atmosphere. You can imagine all sorts of things, can't you?
Shit, what was that?
themselves back. I'm sure they could, you know. And at least know
I have attended some stuff like that.
Have you?
they have, you know, whether it's a spirit walk or a vision quest or whatever. I don't know.
There it is again.
Yeah.
Here's something.
Some people mention Vikings. I sort of dispelled it, but who am I to say it wasn't Vikings? Others say maybe aliens, you know, from outer space.
Here's of the guy.
Yeah, well, I don't think so.
You don't know.
I'm keeping an open mind.
Yeah, I heard they had good mushrooms around here.
They sort of threw up their hands and said, we really don't know what
We
this
don't know
is.
what this is.
Oh, I see.
No, neither do we know.
We don't know what it is.
Yeah.
We think we.
We've got some
Yeah.
idea. What